My portfolio website is very, very ugly. And we're going to fix that. So in this video, what we're going to do is customize this website so that it looks a decent bit better. I'd say there are three ways that you can customize a website. Number one, you can write CSS code from scratch in order to style everything that shows up on your pages. I would say mostly we're not a good enough designer to make that look good. Usually if you try to write your own CSS, it ends up looking like a train wreck, so we just can't trust ourselves. Another thing you can do is go on the internet and download a template. So you can go to something like html5up.net and download a template and somehow try to force everything that you're doing into these templates that they look nice. It's just going to be a little bit of a learning curve there. What we're going to do is something that's in between those two. We're going to use something called a CSS framework. A CSS framework is pretty much a list of basic style rules that you can use to design your website. It takes care of common things like, just making things not look awful, setting your title and subhead sizes, making images look pleasant, columns, all that normal stuff that just prevents our website from looking awful, whereas allows us a little bit of flexibility and a little less effort than dealing with pretty much a full-blown template. So there are different CSS templates out there that come with different styles. In the same way that if you downloaded, some sort of template, the templates would all look kind of different. This one is called Bulma. It's what we're gonna be using today. Many people have probably not heard of it, let's be honest. The really popular CSS framework is something called Bootstrap. The issue with using Bootstrap is your website will look like every other website that uses Bootstrap. And it's, if you start to use Bootstrap for a while, you start to recognize Bootstrap pages. And no shade on Bootstrap pages, it's just the idea that when someone looks at our website, we don't want them to think, oh, they use Bootstrap for this. We want them to just think, oh, this website looks fine. So we're going to use a slightly smaller, slightly less, let's say complicated, maybe less featureful CSS framework called Bulma. I enjoy it, use it for most of my websites, but honestly, everything that we cover in this video, if you go through the Bootstrap docs in the same way we go through the Bulma docs, you'll be able to do the same thing with Bootstrap. So what we need to do is we have our website. This is what my website looks like. I, in theory, built it using a tool called Final version 2 True Final. There we go. And it's just a template engine that uses blah, blah, blah magic stuff in order to have kind of a complicated website. What we are going to be doing here in this video, you could just, if you're working with a plain HTML website, it's totally fine, no big deal. Everything transfers 100% because we're only going to be working on our home page here. So just this home page here, it's just some simple HTML, so nothing else is really going to need to come into it. So when I do something like say, hey, I need to start up my web server with npm run start, and then bam, here's my website. If that's not the way you do it, if you just open up an HTML file, don't worry about it. It's all completely the same. So the first thing we need to do, if this is our website here and this is the code to our website, we need to add Bulma to it. What Bulma is going to allow us to do is, for example, for this H1, we're going to be able to say something like class equals title. And then based on this class, it's going to go into Bulma and say, Bulma, if something has the class of title, what does it look like? And Bulma's going to say, here's what it should look like. And then as a result, everything will look like Bulma wants it to look like. So here's what I'm going to do. We are going to go to, we're not going to install it like this, by the way. If we were running in a fancier way, if we were using React or some wild thing like that, something node based, we might do npm install, but we're just going to do it the simple, easy peasy way. We're going to click getting started. which is the same as if we clicked docs right here. We are looking for overview and start. One issue with Bulma is things are spread out over a lot of pages, so it can be difficult to find what you're looking for. Instead of just going to one or two very long pages and just searching on the page for something like button, you have to click through all these sidebars in order to find things. You'll survive, but it's a little bit of a pain. So what we want to do is we want to add Bulma to our page. The way to do that is to use an HTML link tag in order to say, hey, web page, go out and grab this CSS file. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to paste it on into my index. I'm going to do it up top inside of the head section. And so now that we have added this to our page, I'm going to save, I'm going to refresh, and ta-da! Not really what we were looking for, but you know. So by default, the way that Bulma works is it just says, I don't care what kind of tag you are all going to look the same. And everything that we do is going to be attempting to move this text here away from looking like this kind of like default paragraph thing. So how are we going to do that? We're going to read the documentation. Every single CSS framework is different, whether using Bulma or Bootstrap or Pure or Skeleton or any one of a million of them. It's all just a game of knowing the things to type in order to get the results you want, but it is specific to the single framework you are working with. So I'm going to go down to elements here, scroll down. Oh no, I'm going to filter for title because I know that's the name under elements. I'm going to click title, and it's going to say there are two types of headings. There's a title and there's a subtitle. Titles look big, a little bit darker. Subtitles look smaller, thinner, a little bit lighter. We can turn Hi, I'm Soma into a title by just saying class equals title. So I'm going to go into my HTML. I'm going to say class equals title, save it, refresh, and there we go. It's nice. It's big. The way that this works is it says, okay, you said class equals title. Where are the styles for class equals title defined? Oh, inside of this Bulma CSS file here. If we actually opened up this file, we would see that it's a crazy amount of CSS. Can we look at the unminified one? Yeah, so there we go. So when we add Bulma, it's just like cutting and pasting all of this into a style block here or something like that. I don't know why you would do that, but if we look up, let's say, title, you can see that there are a bunch of rules that have to do with title, and we didn't have to write them because the guy who made Bulma did. So that's clearly a title, and I would guess that this right here is probably a subtitle. So if we look at the Bulma documentation, we see we can add class equals subtitle. So even though this is a p tag, we can add class equals subtitle, save, refresh. There we go. Looks pretty good. One problem is, though, this text isn't quite big enough. I would like it to be larger. Luckily, if we keep scrolling down the page, we can see that when we set up our title, we can set it with different sizes. By default, it's this size 3, but I think I might be interested in this big one, this is 1 size. So by adding to my class equals title, the other class of is 1, save it, refresh. There we go. It's nice. It's big. We can probably do the same thing with our subhead here. Maybe it would make sense for it to be a little bit bigger. I'm going to scroll down. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The default is 5, so maybe 4 is probably what we're interested in. You can see here is 4. So I will add subtitle is 4. It will go into Bulma and it will say, okay, here we go. That is what we're doing. I could go through and make each one of these a little bit bigger, but it takes a long time to add classes to all of these H3s, and my mouse is being kind of weird, so I'm just going to skip it for now. What I'm interested in doing personally is putting these into columns. Maybe let's say 3 columns, if that sounds reasonable. How are we going to find that out? Oh, I don't know. We could start to search for columns over here, and it's, oh, there's a whole section called columns. We can just click this section called columns. It'll break us out with all of these different pages. Unfortunately, yes, different pages, but it's very easy to throw a bunch of columns into a Bulma project. The way we're going to do this is, of course, there's not a next button down here. Sure, we're going to click basics. Why not? So this is how you do it. You say div class equals columns, and that's the container that holds all of your columns. And then right here you say column, 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 and that automatically creates 4 evenly spaced columns. So let's do that. Before our very first H3, which is this one right here, the simple scatter plot in D3 from class, I'm going to say div class equals columns. And I want my columns to end all the way down at the bottom after my very last story. And then for each one of these H3s, I'm going to wrap them in div class equals column. So of course it's throwing in that closing tag there. I don't want the closing tag there. I want the closing tag after the H3. So hopefully I can do all of this in a very ugly way, and then I can just tell it to format and it will automatically format. So I'm going to Command Shift P to open up my command palette, type format document, hit enter, and there you go, automatically formats it for me. So we got our A inside of our H3, inside of our div class column. This is a column, this is a column, this is a column, and it's all inside of div class equals columns. I saved, I'll refresh, and there we go. Look at all these delightful, delightful columns. The problem with all of these delightful, delightful columns is I only want 3 of them, not 6 of them. So one way we could fix this is by surrounding these 3 in div class columns and these 3 in div class columns. I don't want to do that. It's too much work. I am sure that if we keep reading the documentation, we'll figure out another solution. Oh, hey, column sizes. Next page. So if I want to change the size of a single column, you just use a class. That's all a CSS framework is you just keep throwing classes on things in order to make it look like you want. We would like each one of these to be 1/3, right? So this is going to be a third, a third, a third, a third, a third, a third. So I will go in here and I'll say div class column is 1/3. And just to show you what it looks like if I just assign it to one of them, I'm going to hit refresh. And now this one becomes 1/3. And these ones divide up the remaining 2/3 of space. But that's not what we want. We want each one of these to be 1/3. So every single column is going to get the 1/3 treatment. I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh. And now we only have 3 of them because these are our first 3 columns, and then our other columns are going off the side of the page. Now my question is can we solve this by somehow reading more on this page? I think the answer is no. Now the reason why I know how to solve this problem is because I looked at it on the internet. I asked GitHub and then they told me. There we go. Here it is. Here it is. For some reason, even though everyone in the world is going to want to do what we just did, where it wraps, it wraps, it wraps. If you want your columns to automatically wrap to new lines whenever they hit 100%, like a third plus a third plus a third is 100%. Please go to the next line. We need to add is multi-line to it as well. So I'm going to go up to the top and I'm going to say div class equals columns is multi-line. And save it. And there we go. They now go on extra lines. Delightful, delightful. Now that we have all of this extra space, it might make sense to write a little blurb about each one of these stories. I think that'll look nice. So a little blurb about this story. It's fascinating. It's interesting. Please read more. And I'm just going to add this same blurb for every single one of these. Blurb, 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 blurb. Save it, refresh. Nah. I think maybe this should be a little bit bigger, right? This should clearly be a title if this is going to be text. I think this text looks fine. I just think that this needs to kind of be a little bit more titly. So just like we did before, for this H3, I can say class equals title. I'm going to see how this size looks. That's a little big. What the default was is 3, so maybe we'll make it is 4. Is 5. Let's stick with is 4. That seems fine. That seems fine. Great. So we are going to add to each one of these H3s div class is 4, and as a result, it's now going to look a little bit more pleasant. Now, along with the size here, notice that we now have a space between the title and this text down here. It's all of these little things that come along with CSS frameworks that are what you are going to fail to do correctly if you try to write CSS by yourself. Granted, maybe you're good at CSS. Maybe it's, you're perfect, everything's amazing. But generally speaking, it's just not always going to work great for you. So, okay, here we are. We have this, everything's looking good. My favorite part of every CSS framework is always a button. And so, maybe I want to add buttons to this. Those going to be under elements. There we go. Buttons. So yeah, the classic button in different colors, sizes, and states. And the way you do it is just this. Button class equals button, sure. Or a class equals button, or input class equals button. So the fun thing about these kinds of styles, especially for something like the button tag, you can use all kinds of different elements and just have to add a class to them. So what we could do here is we could add a little like href equals story about something index.gdoc, and we could say read the story. If I refresh, I guess it's fine that it's over here, right? Right. So it says read the story. Not very interesting looking. But if we said class equals button and we save it, now it looks a little bit better. Maybe we'll make that a little smaller. Let me put that in a paragraph tag too to make sure it has a little bit of spacing before and after. Of course it didn't get any. What was I thinking? What was I thinking? Okay, so we can say, hey button, let's give you a color. Let's say, I don't know, is info, is warning. I always think warning is a good color. So we'll say is warning, button, class equals button, is warning, refresh, read the story. Ah, what a beautiful link. What a beautiful link. And it just goes, right there. But maybe we want it a little bit smaller. If we keep going down, oh, hey, look, small, normal, medium, large. I can just add is small to it. And there we go. Is small, save, refresh, and there we go. Now we could add something like read the story. We can maybe say, we can add another link. Let's pretend this linked off to GitHub. Check the code and maybe make that, is danger, to give it a little other viz there. Yeah, and so, you can see other things. I'm really irritated by the fact that there's not space on top of this, and I'd love to know why there's not space on top of this. But that would mean that I'd have to read so much more about how all of this stuff works. I don't want to tell you about content yet, but maybe I'll have to. So one of the things that gets really irritating about writing stuff in a CSS framework is you always have to say, like, title is for this class button, and just like style. But one thing you can do is, let's say we got rid of these classes here for a story about something from Google Docs. I'm getting rid of this title is 3. I'm going to refresh it, and now it just looks like this. Now, in theory, the code that we wrote, we have an H3, we have a P tag, that should mean something to our browser. The fact that this is an H3, it should be bigger. The fact that this is a P, it should be smaller. Things should be formatted a certain way. In Bulma, one thing you can do is, if you only have HTML tags and you want to style them, you can just say div class equals content. And if you say div class equals content, everything inside of this div is going to automatically be styled. So I said H3, P tag, all of this stuff, automatically style yourselves. And there it looks, that actually looks fine. We might actually transition to only doing this because I did not like having to say title is for again and again and again and again. So let me just go through and delete all of those title is fors. I'm doing find and replace, getting rid of all of them, saving it, having this ugly screen again. And then I'm just going to go back and I'm going to say, actually, let's see what happens if I do content on our is 1/3. Let's see what happens there. Oh, amazing. It just automatically works. Great. I could probably put content on my columns up here, and then it might apply to everything inside of it. Let's see if it works. Oh, hey, there we go. So we didn't have to go piece by piece by piece by piece saying content. We just said, hey, the stuff in here, you're going to treat it as content. Based on the class of content, H3s become a certain size, Ps become a certain size. They look better than, let's say, this default, H1, H3, P tag, things like that. So they are styled a little bit in accordance with how Bulma works, but we just don't get to customize them, or don't have to customize them as much as we would otherwise. So I'm going to get rid of this div class equals content. The one that was on this one here. Refresh. Perfect. Okay, what else might we want to put on here? Usually what you end up doing is you just end up scrolling around and you're like, wow, I love icons. Is there a Twitter icon? Well, oh, do we need to add them separately? I'm not going to talk about them. Well, let's actually see. I'm going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to put it by, I don't know, just randomly up at the top. And we'll see if it works. Okay, no, didn't work. So along with CSS frameworks, there are also libraries of fonts, and you just basically add them to your page in the exact same way that you add CSS stuff. So Font Awesome is one, Font Awesome 4, Material Designs, Ionicons, things like that. you add them. And if you want little icons like a, maybe we would want a Twitter icon next to where it says, here's how I am on Twitter. Maybe you want a little Instagram icon next to your Instagram username, things like that. We're not going to do that now. I trust that you can figure it out by clicking into Font Awesome 5, adding Font Awesome to this, and then just using this code here. What else do we have? Tag. Small tag labels to insert anywhere. Now, because this is a portfolio, that might actually be really useful to us because we can say what we use to build each one of these things. For example, this is D3, this is D3, this is Google Docs, and potentially Data Wrapper. So how about this? This is our tag. Span class equals tag label. Let's just add one to, I don't know, before we have a simple scatter plot in D3 from class. Save it. It's a little too much space there. Maybe we can add it inside of the H3. See how that looks. Yeah, that might be good. That might be good, but only if we make it a little bit smaller. So let's see. We can change it to all these colors as primary, as link, as all of that. We can use the light versions. Normal size. There's not a small size. Why is there not a small size? That is heartbreaking. That is heartbreaking. Oh, fun. We can create a list of tags. So let's do that instead. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to say, hey, this is our project that we made. Down at the bottom, I'm going to list all of the technologies that we used. We used Python Pandas. We used D3.js, and I don't know, let's just say we used Data Wrapper even though we didn't. So I'm going to save it. I'll refresh, and yeah, that seems pretty decent. And maybe each one of these can always be styled differently. So maybe we'll always say is success for this one, and is warning for this one, and what are other styles that we have here? Is primary, is link maybe. Now, even though these aren't success, warning, or link, we can still use the styles in order to kind of bring it along. And there we go. And so what we could do is just add these to each and every one of our stories in order to explain the technology that we used. So maybe this one doesn't use Data Wrapper. No, this one doesn't use Data Wrapper. This one doesn't use pandas. Yeah, and you can just go through and add it for each one of those. In this case, it would conflict with these buttons here, so you'd probably get rid of those. But this is the idea. This is how it works. They look fun. I just wish that they could be smaller. These are clearly smaller. These are clearly smaller right here. I'm going to inspect and see what's going on here. Who knows? Who knows? Is there anywhere where they said they should be small? No. All right. Well, I'm gonna try it. Is small. Are you gonna work? No, of course it's not gonna work. All right. Well, just live with that. It's fine. You'll be okay. If you wanted them to stand out less, you could add is light to them, which I believe the class that they give to things to make them kind of fade out a little bit. Yeah. So that's definitely another way you could end up doing this. So play around with here. Tags are always fun. Let's see. You can make them rounded instead of less rounded. All of that. What else? What else? So we have, we're not going to do forms, maybe components. Breadcrumbs, cards. There's always something like a card. There's always something like a card. It's an all-around flexible and composable component. So what cards are they are blocks like this. We're kind of like, it's a bunch of stuff that goes together with like headers and footers and all kinds of parts. What we could have actually done is, instead of using what we did, which is just we used, let's see, just an H3, a P tag, and then, another P tag in order to write something like this, we could have actually made this be a card itself. So if we wanted to get a little bit fancier with the style, we can find one that, looks similar to what we're looking to do. Or we can just grab the most complicated one and slowly cut it down. So yeah, I'm just gonna copy all of this. I'm gonna throw it into this column right here, and we'll just see what it looks like. All this crazy content. Okay, that looks insane. I'm actually gonna put it in a different one. I'm gonna put it in a second story from Google Docs that I stole from Kate. Yeah, that's probably a little bit better. Right, I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh, and there we go. So what am I going to do here? Well, I probably don't need, let's say, this thing here. Maybe an image would be good here. Maybe we could end up putting an image on there. We might have issues because of that content wrapper that we did up above, but we'll suffer through it for the moment. So let's see. I'm going to get rid of, let's say this is media left here. Cut that. Save it. Okay. This is going to be our title. So I'm going to say a second story about Google Docs that I stole from Kate. And I'll put it right here. Now, bear in mind, this is a P tag. Title is 4. This is an H3. Is that going to screw everything up? No, seems to look fine. We could change this to be class equals title is 4, and it would actually not really adjust too much at all. Is 2? Okay, yeah, so it'll work. It'll work. But we'll leave it as an H3 because that's fine. And do we need a subtitle here? Nah, maybe not. Maybe not. So we can get rid of that subtitle. And then this section down here, if we look at it, hey, remember div class content? It automatically gives a bunch of rules to all the stuff that's inside of it so that it looks pleasant and nice. So all we need to do is copy this P tag in here, and it will automatically, I guess there aren't any real styles in there. And there we go. Maybe there's a little bit too much spacing there, but we can figure something out about that later. Then what you would do is you would go in and you would add an image here, and that would give you, everything you're looking for. Now, because we're putting this inside of content, I think there's these weird spacing issues. But let me figure out how to get rid of them. So let's see. The issue that's coming in is because we're saying this whole thing is content, because we were too lazy to say this is content, this is content, this is content, this is content, this is content. The issue is if we look at this right here, this figure element right here, there is a CSS rule that says inside of content, figure has a margin left of 2ems and a margin right of 2ems. If we get rid of that, looks nice. So a couple ways we could solve this. One thing we can do is we can just override whatever Bulma says to do. So if there's a rule that you find on this right-hand side here when you're inspecting and you don't like what it's giving you, what you do is you say, hey, after we read in this style sheet, I'm going to add a new style. And that style is going to be margin left 0, margin right 0. So it's inside of a style block, and this overrides whatever happened here. So I'm going to save, I'm going to refresh, and there we go. Looks great. Now, if I did this above where I add my Bulma style sheet and I save, it will not work. What you need to do is make sure that your styles, your custom styles, your override styles show up below the inclusion of your CSS framework. If you're trying to customize things, always put that down below. Like for example, let's say we wanted to change the color of the links here. For all of these links, let's say I wanted to make them like all of these colors are awful. Let's say I wanted to use a color like this. All I would need to do is add another CSS rule where I say the color of links is this color. And because I put it after Bulma, it ends up acting as a customization. Now there are fancier ways to do this. If you use Sass, you can write things like variables. Let's see. Yeah, so down at the bottom, if you use Sass, you can do all this magic stuff here, but we didn't install it using Sass. We installed it using a simpler method. So you can just live with this. You'll be fine customizing down here. We could also move all of these into an external CSS file if we wanted, but because we're only working on our home page, I'm just gonna leave it all right there. All right, so what we could do is just take each one of our stories, this story, this story, this story, and then push them into this stuff here, these nice big cards. Now, an issue with that is we probably want a little bit of extra spacing around here. I feel like these are a bit aggressive. Let's see, so I'm gonna make each one of these be a card. So I'm gonna turn, this is a 3D scrolly telling story. This will also be a card. I'm gonna take this H3, I'm gonna throw it in instead of that H3. I'm gonna take this blurb, it's the same as that blurb, so I think we're good. Save it, refresh, there we go, great. And then we have our final one over here, and you say to me, Soma, I want this to be smaller. This is clearly too big, this is clearly too big. And I say, why is it this size? It's this size because you told it to be, right? If we say, make this is 1/4, make this is 1/4, and we save. Oh no, it didn't get any smaller. Do I not know how to spell fourth? No, I think I know how to spell fourth. Let's see what's happening here. Oh, right, you can't do 1/4. Sorry. So when you're dealing with the sizes of columns, they are based on very specific, there's like a 12 column thing. So I could say is 1/5. I could say is 1/4, so turn it down to 25%, for example. I'm gonna say, hey column, here's what you are. So that was a good example of guessing and failing as to what a class would be. So there we go. I think that's probably a better size. But then notice that because this is a different size, this text is now a little bit too big. The reason this text is too big is because we're using H3s. One thing we could do is change this to an H4 and H5, or we can just say, hey, title is, what, is 5? Let's see what that looks like. That looks a little bit better. So sure, let's have each one of these be nope, not that one. So this is one card, and this is our other card. And so now those are a little bit smaller. And then this one is still nice and big. It's taking up all the remaining space because that is how columns work. It will take up all of the remaining space as long as that space is there. Now I would like to bring this in a little bit to the center. I feel like it's a little bit wide. Now the question is that under here? Ah, great, beautiful, beautiful. a lot of times you have to figure out what things are called when you're working on CSS frameworks. And usually under layout, there's something like a container or something like that. So I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to scroll down. It tells me things, blah, blah. All I want is to see what I got here. Okay, div class equals container. Just give me an example, and then that's what I want to roll with. So div class equals container. So let's go up to the very top after the body, and I'm going to add a div class equals container. Down at the bottom, I'm going to close that div class equals container. I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh, and there we go. So it brought it in a little bit, and based on how my layout is, it's going to make it bigger, smaller. Now, another thing you'll notice is as this got smaller, suddenly things shift from being columns to being all in a row. This is responsive design. It's the idea that if you're on a phone, if you're working on a smaller browser, you have less space to work with, so it really doesn't make sense to have, let's say, 3 columns right here. And automatically in Bulma, when you're working with columns, if the page gets small enough, it will convert all of your columns into just a simple list, which is pretty good, except this looks a little bit awful, a little bit big, but you know, that's life. That's life. You would just have to change the images that you're using there, because this is a pretty big placeholder image. It says the image is 4 by 3, which is why the ratio is 4 long, 3 tall. Where can we find out how to adjust images here? Let's see, 16 by 16, blah, 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 is 1 by 1, 5 by 4, 3 by 2, 5 by 3. I think this is a pretty good aspect ratio, to be honest with you. So I'm going to change my images to be 5 by 3 instead of 4 by 3. Yeah, I feel like that's maybe a slightly better use of space. Okay, so anyway, let's see, what do we do? Our page exists, everything's good. We would like this top part to stand out a little more. And once you spend enough time working with CSS frameworks, you learn special words such as hero. So what a hero is, it's a hero banner. It showcases something. It's just like a big thing that shows up at the top of your page. And you say, what does that mean? And I say, look, I'm just gonna cut and paste this and you're gonna see what it looks like. So I'm gonna go up to the top of my container. I'm gonna paste this hero in. I just stole their code, didn't really pay attention to what it was. And we see that it comes out something like this, which honestly, this might look better than what we have right here, right? Because it really stands out from everything else. So I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna cut all this code out and I'm just gonna throw it inside of hero body, because why not? Save it, refresh, and there we go. That looks pretty good. I'd say we probably need a little bit of spacing underneath here. We need a little bit of spacing between a sample scatter plot in D3 and this stuff up here at the top. Now, if we look at this, I think that this is a result of a section. So what is a section? Let's see what Bulma has to say. It says, this is a section, a sample container. Divide your page into sections. Okay, thanks. Thanks. So I'm just gonna say, hey, one section is for our hero. One section is for everything else. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Somewhere down at the bottom, you just start throwing in, close div, close section tags. I think this div tag is the container and this is the section, so we wanna nest it inside there. There we go. Beautiful, perfect. I mean, not beautiful and perfect, like these now look ugly, but this is a decent website. There are plenty of things that we might end up wanting to change. For example, these links here. These links here, you can no longer see them as being a link color. I think probably because Oh, no, just because it overrules it. Weird. If I click this, I inspect it, it says, okay, if you have something in a subtitle, it's strong. Oh, this is awful, right? Okay, so inside the hero that is primary, blah, 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 just make everything be this color, or this color. Where's it pulling that color from? Okay, yeah, it's pulling it from there. I don't know why it is obsessed with making the colors be wrong. But what we can do is maybe we can add another style to this. So we could add text decoration underline, or we could say, hey, inside of a hero, if you have a link, give it an underline. We'll refresh and that'll work. Now, a problem is that we don't like this color, right? We want this to be some sort of color that pops a little bit more. If I said, let's say I just said color red right here, right? So every link inside of the hero should have the color of red. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Well, when you have CSS rules, look at how long the CSS selector is. It's like, hey, when you have a hero that also has the class of is primary and you have a link that's not a button and not a drop-down item and not a tag and not a pagination link, make it this color or whatever. Basically, because this one is longer, it's more specific than our rule. So even though our rule came after this rule, because this rule is a very long, it is very powerful, and it doesn't want to let anything overrule it. If you ever get in a case where you're trying to change a color or a size or spacing or something like that, and it's not letting you, you could do like, oh, hero, dot is blah, blah. And we could just type out that whole thing. Awful idea. Awful idea. I mean, it's probably a better idea than what I'm going to teach you. If you really want it to be red, exclamation mark, important, before the semicolon there. And what this means is, no matter what, use this rule. Maybe we can make it a different color. That's ugly. That's ugly. I mean, honestly, we should probably not even be doing this at all, but whatever, it's fine. We can say what? Background white, color black. That might look a little nicer. Yeah, we'll get rid of that underline. Yeah, maybe we can add a little bit of padding there. Padding, 5 pixels, 2 pixels. Let's do it the other way. 2 pixels, 5 pixels. That's fine. Make the font size a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. No, that all looks ugly. So basically, if we want to change the color of something or the size of something or the shape of something, and we just aren't powerful enough to do it because we don't have a specific enough rule, all you need to do is exclamation mark important there. And that will solve your problem. Granted, I don't like that black, so I'm gonna comment it out, but you'll have it there in case you want it. So yeah, I think that is probably it in terms of how to style things. What you will want to do is honestly just poke around in the Bulma documentation in order to see what all of your options are. Because there's all kinds of fun things, modals, things like this. You can have nav bars at the top that looks nice and they're branded and they have, drop downs and things like that. What even else? Yeah, a lot of this stuff is probably not geared towards portfolios. It's probably geared towards like web applications, but that's fine. That's fine. So yeah, just poke around in here until you see the things that you want and just fix your page up, everything from typography to spacing to color, all of this stuff you will be able to change. So yeah, there we go. That's my homepage. I think one thing I'm going to change. If we go to our, let's see, our hero here, there are two kinds of heroes. Or not really two kinds of heroes. but you can have a hero that goes all the way back and forth. Why does this not go fully left to right? Well, you can inspect it and you can say, okay. Oh, it's the container, right? So the container is saying, I will never be bigger than 960 pixels. But if we moved our hero, can I just drag it here? If we moved our hero outside of it, looks a little bit better. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to take my hero, my section right here, and I'm going to move it outside of div class equals container. Normally what you do in these situations is you have to throw a container on the inside. I don't know if it'll work here in order to like make things line up correctly everywhere else. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So what we did is we said, hey, this is going to be our hero. Inside of our hero, we want to still make it so it never gets wider than 960 pixels. So yeah, there we go. Beautiful, beautiful. And so the idea being that this doesn't look like a Bootstrap page. It definitely looks like a Bulma page, but because not many people use Bulma, you'll be able to get away with it. And so by using, let's say, we'll do one more thing. And that is another way of displaying this stuff down here. So we did this in, 3 even columns. We did this with cards. We did this in uneven columns. The final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take, let's say, these first two, a sample scatter plot in D3 from class. I'm going to make it so that there's an image here, and then to the right there is all of our text. You say, well, how do you do that? How do you do that? Well, think about it. So let's say I have columns. This is a set of columns. I want one column to be like an image right here, and the other column to be bigger, and I want it to have all of this information in it. So I want 2 columns. The first column is going to be, let's say, 1/3, and our second column is also going to be 1/3. So I'll save that. I'll refresh. That is 2/3. Sorry. So if our first one is 1/3, our second one is 2/3, we'll automatically take up space like this. Now I can take this code right here and move it in over here. So I'm going to say, okay, from the H3 down to this div, I'll cut it out and I'll put it inside of the 2/3. Bam, okay. And I want an image there. An image sounds good. I'm just going to copy this image right here. And, we could read the documentation for images, but if this looks bad, we will. But for now, I'll just leave that placeholder there. There we go. Look at that. Beautiful. And now, here's the thing that really makes stuff look nice. Here's the stuff that really makes it look nice. We could add another column underneath this, another set of 2 columns for the next story, right? So div class equals column is 1/3, and then I can say div class equals column is 2/3. Do the same thing, take this D3 interactive. Let's see, does it end right here? I think so. And then put that in the is 2/3, refresh, it looks great. I'll put that same kind of image inside of there. Delightful. One thing I love is going back and forth between images being on the left and the right whenever you have something like this. So we could just cut this is 1/3 column and just move it afterwards. And now we end up going back and forth between images being on the left and on the right. So if you wanted to really go fancy, if you wanted to stress some of your project and not others, it might make sense to say, hey, here are my favorite projects. here are the best projects that I've ever done. And then let me get rid of these cards down below just so they look a little bit better. Delete that card. We'll leave it with the H3 and the href. Oh boy, this is too much to do. Too much to do. I don't even know. I'm just going to make these spread out evenly. Is 1/3 and is 1/3. Let's see, first card. Did I get rid of my other? Oh, there we go. Is 1/3. So one thing you could do is put your favorite projects side by side like this, or make them nice and big. And then for all of your other projects, you just kind of say like, hey, here they are, whatever. And one more thing, columns, sizes, is there a full width? Yeah, is full. And so one more thing you can do is if you wanted to add like a header for, let's say, down here, I could add another section and then put a header on it. Or if I wanted to cheat a little bit, I could say div class equals column is full h1 and whatever, my least favorite projects. And there we go. Let's say class equals title is 1, maybe. How's that look? Yeah, that looks fine. We could also pull another hero out of there. I could say, oh, I don't want to copy all that right now. But just anything that you do up here, you can do down here. It's, it's fine. My Cat Republic website I built using Bulma. You can tell because it looks the same way that we did literally everything else. So this is all just columns, buttons, things like that. Very easy for you to do, very easy for you to make. The most perfect, simple, yet custom and your own portfolio ever. Let me just make this is warning to spice it up a little bit. Yeah, look at that. Amazing. So, one person's page looks like this. One person's page looks like this. Just by virtue of having different colors, suddenly you're doing much better than having to cut and paste a template from somewhere where your website looks exactly like someone's website. Or on the other hand, if you pull something from trying to write CSS styles yourself and it just looks ugly. So there you go. Good luck. Make sweet ass portfolios and get sweet ass jobs.